Can your gender influence how much time you're going to spend in prison if you use a gun in self-defense? What about the gender of the jurors? The answer to both questions, surprisingly, is yes, and the results are freaking wild. I'm James Reeves. I'm the U.S. Law Shield Independent Program Attorney for Louisiana and Mississippi. I'm also licensed to practice law in Florida, and perhaps by the grace of Bocephus, I will be practicing in Alabama in 2024 as well. I defend U.S. Law Shield members who have to defend themselves in court, so I've been intrigued by this study called Will It Hurt Me in Court? Last week, I discussed a mock juror study conducted in 2009 that found if you defended yourself with an AR-15, you were almost 50% more likely to be found guilty, and your prison sentence would be 3 to 4 times longer than someone using a handgun or even a Mini-14. That's with everything else being equal. Just by the fact that you used an AR-15 to defend yourself, you're more likely to be convicted, and for a longer time. The conclusion was that AR-15s are perceived by the masses as offensive, not defensive weapons. At least that's what the researchers concluded in this paper. Several of you looked at the report that I linked and commented, hey, wasn't this experiment from the 90s during the assault weapons ban? If you look a little bit closer, you'd have seen that the study I'm talking about was conducted in 2009, referencing 2 other experiments from the 90s. So it's still relatively recent, and for that matter, I think if anything, the perception of the AR-15 has gotten worse since the 90s, not better. But you tell me what you think about my theory here in the comments. Let's talk about the scenario again. You hear a noise, you go downstairs, there's a burglar, he's got something in his arms that he's stealing from you, DVD player, TV, whatever. He's unarmed, but by the time you come upon him, he's just 15 feet away from you. You point a gun at him, you say, hey man, stop what you're doing. And he looks at you and he curses at you and he says, I'm gonna fucking kill you. So you light dude up, you shoot him twice, and you kill him. These researchers asked a panel of mock jurors whether or not you were guilty or innocent, and if you were guilty, how long you should go to prison. And they used several different firearms in this test. What I mean by that is in some scenarios, the homeowner had a revolver or a Glock or an over-under shotgun or a pump shotgun. But the study ended up focusing primarily on the Mini-14 versus the AR-15 just because the results were so different. If a homeowner used a Mini-14 versus an AR-15, and they have the exact same capabilities, so it's kind of amazing. Homeowners using this, a Mini-14 or a handgun, were going to be sentenced to 2 to 4 years on average, while under the exact same set of facts, AR-15 wielding homeowners were sentenced to 7 to 9 years by the mock jury. That's everything else being equal, just the guns being different. Also, AR-15 homeowners were found guilty much more often, 65% of the time versus 45% of the time for Mini-14 owners. But incredibly, the gender of the jurors, the gender of the defendant, all other things being equal, made a significant difference in the outcome of the cases. Let's talk about men versus women as jurors. In general, female jurors delivered the homeowner defendant higher sentences than male jurors did. The male average sentence for the armed defendant homeowner was 3.9 years, and the average sentence handed down by female jurors was 5.7 years, all other things being equal. To focus specifically on the AR-15, male jurors, on average, sentenced the homeowner to 7.2 years in prison. Female jurors, they would sentence the homeowner to 8.5 years in prison, almost 20% longer. And although I didn't see the raw data, the report did say, and I quote, our analyses of guilty and non-guilty verdict decisions found that females were more likely to find the defendant guilty regardless of the defendant gender. Let's talk about 4 different scenarios here. You've got a female homeowner with a Mini-14, a female homeowner with an AR-15, a male homeowner with a Mini-14, male homeowner with an AR-15. In those 4 scenarios, the only time female jurors gave lower sentences than male jurors did was, lock in your guess, women homeowners with Mini-14s. When a female homeowner defended herself with a Mini-14, female jurors gave her a sentence of 3 years on average. Male jurors would give her 4 years. So those were pretty close. Now, when the homeowner was a man with a mini 14, fellow male jurors handed down the shortest 2.5-year average sentence, while women handed down a 4-year sentence. What about a male homeowner using an AR-15? Male jurors didn't really care much, gave an average 4-year sentence, while females gave a 5-year sentence to the male homeowner with an AR-15. At the end of the day, female jurors gave male defendants only about a year or a year and a half longer sentence than the male jurors did. But for some reason, female jurors really hated it when other women, female defendants, used an AR-15 to defend themselves. So weird. When a woman used an AR-15 to defend her home, she got a sentence of 5 years from male jurors. Let's pause real quick. Note that with everything else being the same, men gave women defendants a 20% longer sentence when they defended themselves versus men. In other words, if a guy uses an AR-15 to defend his house and he's found guilty of manslaughter, male jurors said, we'll give him 4 years in prison. But under the exact same scenario, if a woman uses an AR-15 to defend herself, she's going to jail for 1 year longer, according to the male jurors. That's already kind of screwed up as it is, but it gets worse for the ladies. That's right, the biggest disparity in all of the results was when the ladies gave AR-15 toting women the longest sentences by far, 8 years behind bars. Oof. And the female shooter with the AR-15 also received the highest percent of guilty verdicts from the jurors, where she was found guilty of defending herself from a man in her own home, guilty of manslaughter about 75% of the time. I am so effing shocked by this. I can't be sure it wasn't just made up. It's just crazy. The key takeaway here is that if you're a woman and you shoot an unarmed man breaking into your house, just use a mini 14 and other women will give you a short 3-year prison term for doing nothing wrong, in my opinion. But if you use an AR-15, everything else the same, other women will screw you over, giving you the highest sentence in this study of 8 years. Girls really are ruthless to each other, even after high school. Damn. What does this tell me as a lawyer or as a defendant? I don't want women on my jury in a self-defense case with a firearm. Is it possible to exclude female jurors on the basis that they're going to give your client harsher sentences? Probably not, but it's worth a try. In the U.S. Supreme Court case of J.E.B. versus Alabama, which was a paternity case against a father for child support, the state of Alabama, trying to get child support from the father, can't blame them. They used all their juror challenges to try to exclude male jurors, and they got an all-female jury at trial. The Supreme Court said you can't strike potential jurors on the basis of gender, but in that case, the gender strikes were based on a stereotype that women would be less sympathetic to a male defendant trying to avoid child support. What about here, where it isn't a stereotype, but you have actual research, actual data that shows that women are going to be worse for you or your client defendant in a jury pool? I guess the big question is, why? The study suggested a couple of theories, mainly that a woman using an AR-15 violates our societal expectations, the norms of how women act. In particular, the report reads that analysis of women who train in self-defense tactics suggest they are at risk at trial for not seeming womanly and victim-like. And there's other research out there that agrees with this conclusion, arguing that behavior that doesn't fit the classic schema of the female stereotype will be construed as abnormal, leading jurors to react in a negative sense. Bear in mind, the jurors were college students at a couple of different Texas colleges. Assuming that these results hold true in the real world, what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and if you're looking for your legal fees to be covered, if you find yourself in this situation, you can get 2 extra months added on to your membership for free if you use the US Law Shield referral link below in the description, guys. Thanks for watching. Really can't wait to hear what your takes are on this data. Let me know, and stay safe out there.